At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. What's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's begin. Earth was in a strange position as the motion for membership was debated in the Galactic Council. On one hand, the whispers in the back chambers spoke of the certainty of humanity's acceptance. On the other, actual admission would only be possible if humanity survived 5 more days of the Craddock hegemony invasion, long enough for the Council's bureaucracy to finish its procedures. Every species understood that humanity's fate hinged on one question. Could Stone Age weapons tear through the Craddock's advanced shielding? What none of them knew, however, was that on Earth, in that very moment, as humanity braced for the final battle, the average human, including the elderly and children, was carrying 3 grenades, a shotgun, a rifle, 2 sidearms, and 10 pounds of ammunition. And all of them were ready to prove that when a shield is called impenetrable, it only means you aren't shooting enough. Unaware of this particular aspect of human logic, Brigade Commander Mazik stood motionless before the viewport of Deployment Ship 26, his 4 arms crossed in contemplation as he watched the blue-green jewel of Earth grow larger with each passing moment. The atmospheric entry was proceeding exactly as calculated, the ship's hull glowing as they descended. His personal shield generator glowed while attached to his chest, a white luminescence emanating from the miraculously tiny core embedded in his battle armor. The device was impressive, capable of deflecting energy weapons and kinetic projectiles alike with minimal power consumption. His imposing, leathery frame, nearly 3 meters tall, remained rigid as he observed the world beyond. The mighty hegemony fleet advanced toward the human planet, 30 deployment vessels carrying 60,000 of the finest warriors the Craddock had ever produced. Each ship was vast and formidable. Mazik allowed himself a moment of pride. How many species had he brought to compliance over his 2 centuries of service? 11? 18? Earth would simply be another entry in his distinguished record. Another primitive world learning the futility of resistance against the hegemony's advanced technology. These humans, with their chemical propellants and metal projectiles, would soon discover what countless others had before them, that progress meant submission to those who had already achieved it. The first indication that something was not proceeding according to their meticulous invasion strategy came as Mazik attempted to count the ascending traces of light rising from the planet's surface. Initially, he dismissed them as primitive rocket propulsion, perhaps some desperate attempt at evacuating their leadership. But the traces multiplied, dozens becoming hundreds, their trajectories synchronized as they advanced against gravity. His primary eyes narrowed as he watched Deployment Ship 21 maintaining its position 3 kilometers to starboard. A brilliant flash erupted against its shields, the energy discharge creating ripples of light that danced across the protective barrier. Nuclear explosion, Mazik recognized immediately. Relatively primitive, but not entirely unexpected. Several species had discovered atomic weapons before achieving interstellar capability. The shield metrics on his tactical display show that the barriers had absorbed the blast with very high efficiency. Child's play for the hegemony technology. But then came another flash, and another. The tactical display lit up with warning indicators as dozens of detonations bloomed against Ship 21's shields. Mazik's secondary eyes widened in disbelief as he watched the shield integrity percentage plummet. 80%, 60, 40. The bombardment was relentless, each explosion perfectly timed to strike before the shields could fully reconstitute their matrix. His lips pulled back from his teeth in what might have been a smile of admiration for the idea of concentrating fire in a single target. But the expression froze as the final massive detonation overwhelmed the weakened barriers. The shields collapsed in a cascade of sparking energy, and for a fraction of a second, Ship 21 hung naked in space. Then the nuclear fire touched its hull. The deployment ship transformed into a miniature sun, its armor plating vaporizing instantly, its internal atmosphere igniting in a spectacular fireball that sent debris careening through space. Fragments of metal and ceramic struck against the other ships, each impact creating small flares of light. Mazix watched in silence as what had been a proud vessel of the hegemony fleet became nothing more than an expanding cloud of radioactive debris falling toward Earth's atmosphere. The command-level communications channel crackled to life in Mazix's auditory implant, cutting through the shocked murmurs that had begun spreading across the deployment deck. Fleet Leader Harfax's voice resonated everywhere, his tone carefully modulated to project confidence despite what they had all just witnessed. "Warriors of the hegemony," the fleet leader began, his words reaching every commander across the remaining 29 ships. "We have witnessed a tactical anomaly. The humans have expended their entire atomic arsenal in a desperate gambit against a single vessel. Ship 21's sacrifice will be remembered in our victory chronicles." Mazix felt his muscles relax slightly. Of course, it made perfect tactical sense when viewed through that lens. The humans had consolidated their most powerful weapons against a single target, achieving a Pyrrhic victory that left them defenseless against the remaining fleet. "Their nuclear capabilities are now exhausted," Harfax continued, his voice taking on an almost paternal quality. "What remains are their conventional weapons, their chemical propellants and metal projectiles. Against these, your shields will hold as they have held against 1,000 primitive worlds before. We proceed with the invasion as planned. Show these humans the price of destroying hegemony property. Show them why submission is preferable to annihilation." The speech was textbook hegemony military doctrine, designed to transform a moment of uncertainty into renewed determination. Mazix recognized the psychological manipulation even as he felt it working on his own mind. The loss of 21 was reframed not as vulnerability, but as evidence of human desperation. His confidence returned, bolstered by the knowledge that nuclear weapons were typically the apex of pre-interstellar military technology. Without them, humans would be firing metal slugs at energy barriers designed to withstand directed plasma streams. The worry that had crept into his mind dissipated like water in the desert. Mazix turned from the viewport, his 4 eyes surveying the 2,000 warriors assembled on the deployment deck. They stood in perfect formation, their varied heights creating an intimidating wall of muscle, armor, and weaponry. Some barely reached 2 meters, while others towered at nearly 4. But all shared the distinctive leathery skin and multiple eyes of the Kratic species. Their expressions showed the same momentary uncertainty he had felt, the destruction of 21 having shaken their absolute confidence in the hegemony's supremacy. This would not do. Warriors needed certainty, needed to believe in their invincibility if they were to perform at peak efficiency. Mazix activated his command amplifier, his voice booming across the deck with enough force to vibrate the metal plating beneath their feet. "Warriors of Brigade 7, you have seen the humans' desperation. They have thrown their mightiest weapons at us and managed to destroy 1 ship out of 30. 1! He raised his primary right arm, a single digit extended for emphasis. "Now they have nothing left but primitive projectiles and chemical explosives. We are about to show these humans what the hegemony is made of." The response was immediate and thunderous. 2,000 voices roared in unison, the sound echoing through the deployment ship's hull. Warriors pounded their chests with their lower arms, the impact activating their personal shield generators in a synchronized display of power. Solid light rippled across the formation as each soldier's protective barrier glowed, creating an ocean of luminescent energy. They raised their plasma rifles and particle beam weapons high, the advanced armaments gleaming. Behind the infantry formations, vehicle crews made final preparations on their hover platforms and assault walkers. The mechanical behemoths stood 5 meters tall, their articulated legs designed to navigate any terrain, while their rotating weapon pods could deliver devastating firepower in a 360-degree arc. Technicians ran final diagnostics on shield generators and weapon systems, their movements quick and accurate despite the excitement building in the air. The ground vehicles activated, their anti-gravity systems creating a subtle distortion in the air beneath them. Mazix felt his own battle fervor rising, the ceremonial pre-combat rituals awakening instincts honed over centuries of warfare. The deployment ship shuddered as it entered the lower atmosphere, the turbulence increasing as they descended through Earth's troposphere. Mazix monitored their approach vector on his tactical display, noting in satisfaction that they were precisely on target for their designated landing zone. A cleared area 4 kilometers from the human metropolis designated as Target Alpha. The city sprawled across the landscape, its towers of glass and steel reaching toward the sky in a display of architectural ambition that Mazix had to admit was impressive for a pre-interstellar civilization. Warning indicators flashed across his display as the ship's sensors detected incoming projectiles, but he felt no concern. The missiles exploding against their shields were conventional explosives, chemical reactions that produced impressive visual displays, but negligible energy transfer. His earlier anxiety evaporated completely. If this was the best humanity could muster after expending their nuclear arsenal, the invasion would proceed exactly as the tactical simulations had predicted. The ship's descent engines engaged with a roar that penetrated even the sound-deafened deployment deck. They were entering the final approach phase, the ground rushing up to meet them at a controlled rate. Through the viewport, Mazix could see the other deployment ships spreading across the horizon, each one targeting a different population center. The invasion would be simultaneous and overwhelming, giving the humans no opportunity to concentrate their defenses. A soft chime in his implant indicated incoming communication from the bridge. The captain's voice was calm and professional. "Commander Mazix, we have achieved optimal deployment altitude. Atmospheric conditions are within acceptable parameters. You have authorization to begin ground operations." Mazix acknowledged with a thought. Then he turned to address his warriors one final time. His voice carried across the deck for all ears to hear.
"Warriors of the hegemony, today we claim Earth for the glory of the Kradek. Trust your shields, trust your weapons, trust your training. Show these humans that resistance is futile."
The deployment deck's massive doors began to separate with a grinding mechanical sound, revealing the alien landscape of Earth below. Cool air rushed in, carrying unfamiliar scents of vegetation and industry. The morning sun cast long shadows across the terrain, and in the distance, the target city waited like a prize to be claimed. The deployment ramp extended quickly, creating a bridge between the hovering ship and the ground 20 meters below. The first wave of warriors surged forward, their boots thundering against the metal as they descended.
"For the hegemony! Death to the primitives!"
Came another cry from a younger warrior.
"Today we feast on victory!"
Shouted a squad leader, her plasma rifle already charging for combat. The warriors spread out in formations as they touched down, their shields shimmering defensively. Mazix waited until half his force had deployed before making his own descent, his massive frame moving slowly down the ramp. As his feet touched Earth's soil for the first time, he felt the weight of 2,000 expectant gazes upon him. They looked to him for leadership, for the decisiveness that would carry them to victory. He did not disappoint. Drawing himself to full height, Mazix pointed toward the city with his primary right arm, while his other 3 arms gestured for advanced formation.
Trust your shields and march toward the human buildings. Show them the might of the hegemony. Forward!
The brigade began its advance across the open ground, their formation spreading across a front nearly a kilometer wide. The hover platforms glided alongside the infantry, their weapon systems scanning for targets. The assault walkers took point, their massive legs eating up the distance faster than the biological legs. Behind them, 2,000 warriors marched in perfect synchronization, their shields creating an aura of solid light that rippled with each step. The approach to the city's outskirts revealed humanity's hasty defensive preparations. Mazix's tactical display populated with data as the spotters, specialists equipped with enhanced sensory equipment, began reporting their observations. Wheeled vehicles had been overturned and positioned to create makeshift barricades across the major thoroughfares. The primitive automated transports were reinforced with sandbags stacked to shoulder height, creating firing positions that would have been effective against other humans but seemed almost quaint against hegemony technology. Coils of barbed wire stretched between the barricades, their metal barbs glinting in the morning sun. The spotters' reports grew more detailed as they approached closer. Heat signatures indicated human presence in nearly every building facing their approach route. The structures, primarily constructed of concrete and steel, showed evidence of recent modification. Windows had been removed or enlarged, creating firing ports. Sandbag emplacements were visible on rooftops, and Mazix could see the distinctive shapes of human weapons protruding from various positions. The humans weren't running. They weren't surrendering. They were waiting.
"Commander," reported lead spotter Vrax through the tactical channel, "I'm detecting significant human presence. Estimate 3,000 to 4,000 combatants in our immediate approach vector. They appear to be armed with projectile weapons of various calibers."
Mazix processed this information in silence. 3,000 humans against 2,000 Krydic warriors with energy shields and plasma weapons. The numbers were irrelevant when the technology gap was so vast.
Ignore the barbed wire and the barricades,
Mazix commanded through the brigade-wide channel.
Your shields will protect you from the primitive projectiles. Trust in hegemony technology. Advance with confidence.
The warriors obeyed without hesitation, their training overriding any instinctive caution. The first line of troops reached the barbed wire and simply walked through it, the metal strands sparking harmlessly against their shields before snapping under the pressure. The overturned vehicles posed no greater obstacle. Warriors either vaulted over them with enhanced strength or simply pushed through gaps, their shields deflecting any sharp edges. The 4-legged assault walkers targeted the larger barricades with their particle beams, vaporizing sections of metal and concrete to create wider passages for the hover platforms. The display of technological superiority seemed to emphasize the futility of human resistance. They had entered the city proper now, moving down what appeared to be a main thoroughfare lined with commercial buildings. The architecture was utilitarian, but showed signs of hasty fortification. Mazix noted how the humans had created interlocking fields of fire, each position able to support others. It was good tactical doctrine, but ultimately meaningless against energy shields. The silence was oppressive, and for a moment, nothing happened. The humans remained hidden, waiting. Mazix could respect their discipline, even if he questioned their sanity. Perhaps they were paralyzed by fear, unable to comprehend the futility of their situation. His forces had advanced 300 meters into the city when the world exploded into violence. The humans erupted from concealment with a coordination that spoke of extensive planning and communication. Every rooftop suddenly bristled with weapons, every storefront window shattered outward as gun barrels emerged. The sound hit first, a wall of noise so intense it overloaded Mazix's auditory implants for a fraction of a second. Machine guns, hundreds of them, opened fire simultaneously. The morning air transformed into a solid stream of metal as bullets flew from every conceivable angle. Tracers created a web of light that would have been beautiful if it weren't so deadly.
The impacts against the Kratic shields created a continuous roar of energy discharge, thousands of kinetic strikes per second, causing the protective barriers to flare with brilliant white light. Some warriors instinctively raised their arms to protect their faces, even though their shields should have made such gestures unnecessary. The sheer volume of fire was unlike anything in hegemony military history. Energy weapons fired in precise bursts to conserve power and prevent overheating. These human weapons seemed to have no such limitations, maintaining a continuous stream of projectiles that turned the air itself into a lethal medium.
Maintain formation!
Mazix roared over the command channel, though he could barely hear his own voice over the cacophony.
Return fire! Target the weapon emplacements!
His warriors responded, raising their plasma rifles and particle beams to engage the human positions. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out, cutting through the morning air to strike buildings. Concrete exploded into powder where the beams hit, and several machine gun positions fell silent as their operators were vaporized. But for every position they destroyed, two more seemed to open up. Humans appeared in windows they hadn't even identified as potential firing positions. Some carried their rifles by hand, firing from the hip as they displaced to new positions. Others had weapons so large they required multiple humans to operate, their rate of fire so intense the barrels glowed red with heat. The assault walkers opened fire with their rotating weapon pods, their heavier armaments devastating entire building facades. A 3-story structure collapsed entirely under the sustained barrage, dust and debris billowing into the street. Yet, even as it fell, Mazix could see humans escaping from the rear, carrying their weapons to new positions. The hover platform's anti-personnel weapons created sweeping arcs of destructive energy, but the humans used the rubble and destroyed vehicles as cover, popping up just long enough to fire bursts before ducking back down. The battle descended into a grinding exchange of fire, neither side able to achieve decisive advantage. The Kratic had superior weapons and shields, but the humans had numbers, preparation, and a seemingly endless supply of ammunition. The machine guns never stopped firing, their operators replacing belts of ammunition continuously. Some positions had multiple guns, allowing them to maintain continuous fire, while others cooled or reloaded. Then came the first casualty that shattered Mazix's confidence. Warrior Krex, a veteran of 6 campaigns, had pushed forward to get a better angle on a particularly troublesome machine gun nest. 4 separate human positions had identified his movement and concentrated their fire on him simultaneously. His shield, designed precisely to handle kinetic impacts, was suddenly being asked to deflect hundreds of rounds per second from multiple angles. The shield generator's warning tone was audible even over the battle, a high-pitched whine that indicated dangerous overload conditions. Krex tried to fall back, but a 5th machine gun opened up from a position they hadn't even detected. The combined fire rate exceeded the shield's refresh capacity. For a moment, the light barrier flickered like a failing light bulb, its surface rippling with unstable energy patterns. Then it collapsed entirely. The bullets that had been stopped by pure energy suddenly found flesh. Krex's armor, designed to provide minimal protection since the shields were supposed to handle all threats, offered little resistance to the storm of metal. His body jerked and spasmed as dozens of rounds found their mark, dark purple blood spraying across the rubble. He was dead before he hit the ground.
Pull back!
Mazix commanded immediately, his tactical mind overriding his shock.
Maintain spacing! Don't let them concentrate fire! Give your shields time to cool and reconstitute!
The warriors obeyed, falling back to covered positions while maintaining suppressing fire. The tactical situation had changed dramatically. The shields weren't invulnerable. They had thermal limits and refresh rates that the humans had somehow identified and were exploiting. It was impossible, unthinkable. How could primitive species have developed tactics to counter technology they had never encountered? The answer came as Mazix observed the human fire patterns more carefully. They weren't specifically targeting shield weaknesses. They were simply putting so much metal in the air that shields became overwhelmed through sheer volume. It was the tactical equivalent of solving a complex equation through brute force rather than elegance.
Commander, I need immediate air support on grid reference 739.
Mazix called out, the deployment ship still hovering overhead.
Multiple fortified positions requiring heavy ordnance.
The response was immediate. 3 atmospheric fighters detached from the deployment ship, their sleek forms cutting through the air. They lined up their attack runs and released their payload, directed energy bombs that could level entire city blocks. The buildings housing the most problematic machine gun positions disappeared in blinding flashes of light. The concussive wave shattered windows for kilometers in every direction, and the ground trembled under the impact. Dust and smoke billowed into the sky, creating an artificial twilight. For a moment, Mazix thought they had regained the initiative. The volume of incoming fire decreased significantly, and his warriors began advancing again through the rubble-strewn streets. But as the smoke cleared, his spotters reported new contacts. The buildings they had just destroyed were rubble, but the buildings behind them were already occupied by human forces. Fresh machine gun positions opened up, their operators apparently unconcerned by the fate of their comrades. The humans had defense in depth, every block prepared to exact its toll in Craddock blood.
This is Squad 7. We're taking heavy fire from elevated positions. Squad 3 requesting immediate support. Multiple casualties. We can't advance. There's too much incoming.
The reports flooded Mazix's command channel as the situation deteriorated. Each meter of advance was paid for in warriors and time, their shields constantly on the verge of overload. The humans seemed to have an endless supply of both fighters and ammunition. Some of the machine guns fired for so long without stopping that the barrels actually melted, the metal glowing white-hot before finally warping and failing. But even then, the humans simply pulled the destroyed weapons aside and replaced it with another. They had turned their city into a fortress, every building a bunker, every street a killing field. The tactical situation was becoming untenable. They had advanced barely a kilometer into the city and had already lost 40 warriors, with dozens more suffering from shield generation damage that made their combat ineffective. The assault walkers were taking concentrated rocket fire from human positions, their heavier shields holding but showing signs of stress. One of the hover platforms had been disabled when its anti-gravity system was damaged by an improvised explosive device, leaving it stranded and vulnerable. Mazix made the hardest decision of his military career.
All units, tactical withdrawal to initial deployment zone. Maintain defensive fire and covering positions for wounded evacuation.
The retreat began as an organized tactical movement, but the humans seemed to sense weakness. Their fire intensified rather than decreased, every gun in the city seemingly trained on the withdrawing Craddock forces. Machine guns that had been silent revealed themselves, adding their weight to the storm of metal. And then the artillery began. The first shells were almost beautiful in their arc, dark specks against the morning sky that grew larger with terrifying speed. They impacted among the retreating warriors with devastating effect. Unlike the bullets that struck shields as individual kinetic events, the artillery shells exploded into thousands of fragments. Shrapnel, the humans called it, Mazix would later learn. Each explosion created a sphere of supersonic metal fragments that struck shields from every possible angle simultaneously. The effect on the already stressed shield generators was catastrophic. A shell detonated directly above Squad 4's position, the airburst sending shrapnel down at angles the shields were weakest. 3 warrior shields failed instantly under the omnidirectional assault. The metal fragments tore through their armor as if it were jelly, their bodies shredded beyond recognition. Another shell struck near a damaged assault walker, the explosion finally overwhelming its struggling shield generator. Shrapnel punched through its armor plating, destroying critical systems and killing the pilot instantly. The massive machine toppled sideways, crushing 2 warriors who couldn't dodge in time. The artillery barrage intensified, the humans having apparently pre-registered their entire approach route. Every piece of cover the Craddock tried to use had already been targeted. Shells rained down, their explosions creating a continuous thunder that drowned out even the machine gun fire. But the humans weren't finished.
Mazix's tactical display suddenly lit up with new contacts. Aerial drones, hundreds of them, approaching from multiple directions. They were primitive things, commercial units hastily weaponized, but that made them no less deadly. Each one carried explosives, their operators piloting them directly into Craddock positions with suicidal determination. A drone struck Warrior Thias' shield at maximum velocity, detonating on impact. The explosion itself might not have penetrated the shield under normal conditions, but Thias had been under continuous machine gun fire for minutes. His shield generator, already operating at critical temperatures, simply burned out. The feedback surge killed him before the follow-up machine gun fire could. More drones follow, their operators showing no concern for the value of their equipment. They treated the machines as disposable ammunition, each one guided with deadly precision into Craddock formations. Some warriors tried to shoot them down, but that meant taking their attention off the human ground positions, which immediately exploited the distraction with increased fire. The title of their predicament became horrifyingly clear as Mazix watched another warrior fall, his shield overwhelmed by the simple, brutal mathematics of human warfare. They had been wrong, so terribly wrong. The shields weren't impenetrable. They had limits, thermal tolerances, refresh rates, and the humans had discovered through either calculation or terrible intuition that those limits could be exceeded not through technological superiority, but through sheer volume of fire. Every human with a weapon was contributing to the storm of metal, from belt-fed machine guns to hunting rifles to pistols. Even as Mazix watched, he saw elderly humans and what appeared to be adolescents taking positions at windows, adding their small arms fire to the overwhelming barrage. The entire population had armed itself, turning their city into a weapon that struck from every angle simultaneously. The retreat became increasingly desperate. They had lost nearly 300 warriors now, their formation dissolving into scattered groups trying to reach the deployment zone. The human artillery walked with them, each impact claiming more lives. The machine guns never stopped, their operators firing until their weapons failed, then replacing them and continuing. The shrapnel from countless explosions filled the air with deadly metal fragments that found every weakness, every momentary shield fluctuation, every overtaxed generator.
Fleet Leader, this is Brigade 7 Actual.
Mazix transmitted on the emergency command frequency, his voice strained as he directed the remainder of his forces.
We are suffering critical casualties. The human defense's response exceeds all projections. Their conventional weapons they're overwhelming our shield capabilities through sustained volume of fire, requesting immediate extraction.
The response came not just to him, but across the entire command network. Other brigade commanders were reporting similar situations. The humans hadn't just prepared one city. They had turned every population center into a fortress. Every building was a bunker, every citizen a soldier. Reports flooded in of shield failures, of warriors being torn apart by primitive projectiles that individually wouldn't have scratched their defenses.
All ground forces, immediate withdrawal to deployment ships.
Fleet Leader Harfax commanded, his voice having lost its earlier confidence.
The humans have more ammunition than we thought possible. Full evacuation. Defensive positions only.
The admission was staggering. The mighty Craddock hegemony, conquerors of dozens of worlds, were being driven off by a species still using chemical propellants. But the reality was undeniable. As Mazix finally reached the deployment zone with the fewer than 800 warriors who had survived from his brigade, he could see the same story playing out across the horizon. Deployment ships were taking off under heavy fire, their larger shields holding but showing the telltale flickers of stress. Some ships didn't make it. Ground-based missile systems, hidden until the last moment, unleashed barrages of conventional explosives that, while not nuclear, struck in such numbers that ship shields failed as individual warrior shields had. Deployment Ship 18 crashed back to Earth in flames. its hull perforated by thousands of impacts. Ship 12 lost engine control and careened into a hillside, its death marked by a pillar of smoke visible for hundreds of kilometers. As Mazix's ship lifted off, he looked back at the city they had failed to take. The humans were already emerging from their positions, checking their wounded, replacing their destroyed weapons. They had turned the mathematics of warfare on its head, proving that sometimes quantity could overcome quality through sheer, overwhelming force. They had answered the question that the Galactic Council had posed. Yes, Stone Age weapons could tear through advanced shielding. You just had to fire enough of them. The retreat from Earth became a rout as the true scale of human resistance revealed itself. What Fleet Leader Harfax had assumed was humanity's entire nuclear arsenal turned out to be merely what they were willing to expend on the opening salvo. As the Craddock fleet attempted to reach orbital extraction altitude, the sky lit up with new launches. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, even antiquated bomber aircraft carrying nuclear payloads. The humans had held the majority of their atomic weapons in reserve, waiting for the moment when the hegemony forces were most vulnerable, during their retreat. The flagship, a kilometer-long behemoth that had never known defeat, took 200 direct nuclear strikes in rapid succession. Its shield struggled to dissipate the raw thermal and kinetic energy of multiple fission and fusion reactions. The last warhead broke through, and the pride of the hegemony fleet became a brief second sun in Earth's orbit before scattering into radioactive debris. 11 other deployment ships never made it past the stratosphere, their destruction painting the sky with brief auroras of vaporized metal and organic matter. Their surviving vessels, Mazix's among them, fled Earth's gravity well with damaged shields and depleted warrior completements. Of the 60,000 warriors who had descended to Earth's surface, fewer than 15,000 escaped, losing 75% of their entire infantry. The invasion that was supposed to last 5 days had ended in less than one. The Galactic Council's bureaucracy, for once, moved with unprecedented speed. Earth's successful defense was confirmed, verified, and ratified within the remaining 4 days. Humanity was welcomed into the galactic community not as another conquered species, but as a fellow member. Their unconventional tactics already becoming the subject of military study across dozens of worlds. The Craddock hegemony's humiliation was complete when the Council ruled that all hegemony materials and technology left on Earth, including the wreckage of deployment ships and thousands of sets of advanced armor and weapons, were now the legal property of humanity as legitimate salvage from a failed invasion. It was a subtle but clear punishment from the Council's bureaucracy, a way of censoring the hegemony for starting a war simply because they feared sharing their corner of space with a new species. Mazix survived, one of the few brigade commanders to make it off Earth alive. In his official report to Hegemony Command, he wrote a single line that would reshape military doctrine across the galaxy. The humans taught us that when a shield is called impenetrable, it only means you aren't shooting enough. The report was classified, buried, and hidden away in shame. But the lesson spread anyway, whispered in military academies and discussed in strategic planning sessions. The age of assuming technological superiority meant invulnerability was over. Humanity had proven that with enough determination, enough preparation, and enough ammunition, even the most primitive weapons could bring down the most advanced shields. Didn't the Ewoks do this? The Stone Age weapons had won, not through sophistication or technological advancement, but through the oldest truth in warfare. If you throw enough rocks at something, eventually it will break. Humanity had thrown very fast, very many rocks, and the galaxy's most advanced shields had shattered like glass. The age of respecting the primitive, the simple, and the overwhelmingly numerous had begun, and somewhere in the archives of the Galactic Council, filed away in the records of Earth's admission was a simple note that would echo through history. Species 103, designation Humanity, prove that kinetic weapons remain viable against advanced shielding through sufficient volume of fire. Recommend extreme caution in any future military engagements. They are, as they themselves